The report, it said, clearly and in detail, that the typical British diet was a cause of obesity and serious disease. The food industry didn't like it, and the government didn't release it. For 2.5 years, the report sat locked away. It took a think about that for a moment. For the entire early 80s, while school meals were being stripped back and ready meals were filling fridges, the government already had its own experts' findings about what was going wrong with the way Britain ate. It just chose not to tell anyone. The sixth...
I feel like this is definitely one of those topics that you can get really deep into, and it just gets even darker. I feel like this video is probably only just scraping the surface as to... Today, your fellow Gen Z Brit, born in the 2000s, is very curious minds. Let me check it out. Brits were slim in the 1970s. 7 things that changed that, coming from Britain Retold. Now, I've recently been going on this deep dive into trying to figure out kind of why there's been a significant change in terms of this growing rate of like obesity, and you know, for those guys that are familiar with me, you know that I love going back into the past. And when you do go back into the past, you just like empirically, you do see a difference when it comes to like the amount of slim people, which is interesting when you're thinking about how during those times, before the internet, before all this knowledge on what is healthy and, you know, all these diets that people are now doing and stuff, this wasn't much of a thing, yet people seem to be more in shape. Now, I recently did a video going over this exact topic from the lens of the US, so I thought to see just how similar it was in the UK. But yeah, that's what we're going to be diving deeper into this video today, is try and uncover just what is really going on. And listen, as always, I'd love to know what you guys have to say about this, for those of you guys watching who may have grew up during these times and know what it was like firsthand, as well as those of you guys who didn't, like myself, who are now, you know, witnessing this information, maybe even for the first time. So yeah, definitely let me know as we go throughout this video in the comments below. But of course, with that being said, guys, let's get straight into this video. Let's go!
Look at a British high street on a Saturday afternoon in 1976. Really look at the people. The women coming out of the grocers with their string bags. The bloke coming out of the newsagents with his paper, the kids pressing their faces against the Woolworths window. Almost everyone is slim, not because they're trying to be, just because that was normal. They weren't on diets. Most of them had never seen the inside of a gym. They ate proper meals at set times, cooked from scratch at home. A treat was a bag of crisps from the corner shop or a Wimpy on a Saturday. Nobody talked about calories and nobody counted anything. You had your tea, you had your pudding, and that was it until breakfast. Between roughly 1979 and 1994, 7 things changed that, and not one of them was ever put to the public. By the time all 7 were in place, Britain looked completely different. Let's go through them. The first thing that changed was the children. Before 1980, every school dinner in Britain had to meet a set of nutritional standards. Those rules had been in place since 1944, and nobody thought much about them. But they meant that a child sitting down to a school meal was eating something that had been balanced by someone who knew what they were doing. Meat, vegetables, pudding, a proper hot dinner on a plate. Then the Education Act of 1980 came into force on the 3rd of April. It abolished the nutritional standards completely. Wow. Councils were told to run school meals as a business, not a service. Cash cafeterias replaced set meals, and children chose what to eat. And what children chose, when given a counter full of options and no rules, was chips, cake, and custard. Months before the Act even passed, doctors from Brunel University, the London School of Hygiene, and the Medical Research Council wrote to the Daily Telegraph warning that school food was about to be run on economic principles instead of nutritional ones.
Wow. So I didn't know that things are more kind of strict and rigid in terms of what you ate. Because when I was growing up, I do remember, especially in secondary school or high school, for my Americans watching, I definitely do remember having to pick what I wanted to eat, especially the option between baked beans or peas, which might sound foreign or funny to a lot of my Americans watching. Yes, baked beans was definitely more of a thing in the UK. I wasn't a big fan of them when I was young though, because of the texture. Then I grew to actually end up liking them a lot more. So, you know, for the English breakfast and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, I digress. You know, you could pick a pizza if you didn't want to eat just what was on the menu that day. You know, there's way more room for you to just choose just the unhealthier option. And as kids, who wants to just be eating healthy stuff all the time? You know, if someone's offering you a pizza, you're going to take it. So yeah, that is actually interesting. I didn't realize that. But yeah, I could definitely see that having a negative impact on nutrition.
Of nutritional ones. Nobody listened, but it showed almost straight away. Skilled school cooks who had spent years preparing proper meals became reheaters, opening boxes and sliding trays into ovens. Fresh meat and fresh vegetables all but vanished from school canteens in some areas. School meal take-up fell from around 70% of pupils in the early 70s to just over 40% by the late 80s.
Whoa.
The price of a school meal jumped too, right?
That's a drop in 30% roughly, you know, within 20 years. Wow.
40% by the late 80s. The price of a school meal jumped too, rising by over 40% in the first year. Families who could least afford it pulled their children out. Britain entered what food historians call the no nutrition standards era. It lasted 21 years without a single national rule about what went on a child's plate at school. A generation of children lost the one meal a day that somebody else had thought about for them. And the strange thing is, most people barely noticed it happening. The second thing that changed happened inside the kitchen at home, and it started with a chicken. In 1979, a young product developer at Marks and Spencer called Kathy Chapman, working with a restaurant owner named John Docker, created something Britain had never seen before, a chilled ready meal called the Chicken Kiev, breaded, stuffed with garlic butter, sitting in a plastic tray, ready to go in the oven. It cost £1.99. It sold out, and it changed everything. It was the first crack in something that had held British family life together for decades, the home-cooked tea. Before 1979, most families ate meals made from raw ingredients. Mum peeled potatoes, Dad carved the meat. You knew what was in your dinner because someone in your house had put it there, one ingredient at a time. A bit of mince, an onion, a few carrots, an OXO cube.
Lovely.
You knew the whole recipe because you watched it being made. The Chicken Kiev made ready meals something people were happy to serve. This wasn't a frozen dinner. It was chilled, the kind of thing you could put in front of guests and feel good about. It was designed to be, in the words of one newspaper at the time, a sophisticated alternative to the TV dinner. The kind of thing a working woman could put on the table for friends and not think twice. After it came everything else, Findus, Vesta, Bejam freezer centres on every high street, supermarket own-brand ranges filling every aisle. Microwaves arrived in British kitchens through the 80s and made the whole thing even faster. Within a decade, most families had stopped cooking every meal from scratch, and something went with it that nobody noticed at the time. You stopped knowing exactly what was in your food because you weren't the one making it anymore. The third thing crept in so slowly.
I mean, that is so true. And it definitely does seem to be the case. Like, especially in the 80s where dual income households were becoming more and more common and there's less time for parents to just cook food for their kids. It's definitely created more this market for convenience. And as a result, a lot of those changes have drastically decreased the nutritional value of a lot of those home-cooked meals. And when I look back to these days, it becomes even more obvious to me that this is definitely a trend that has continued and accelerated as we've gone more and more in more contemporary times, with now the rise of these DoorDashes and these Uber Eats. How we can now order food to our homes, which just takes out the whole process of even getting the food in the first place. So it's like, I'm kind of reluctant to dive even deeper into this whole world because I feel like the deeper you go with this kind of stuff, the more you're going to actually be very, very skeptical of basically everything you eat now, because God knows what they're putting in the food. And in many cases, it's like, what can you do, right? Unless you want to be living in a farm somewhere.
That nobody noticed at the time. You stopped knowing exactly what was in your food because you weren't the one making it anymore. The third thing crept in so slowly nobody noticed. In the 70s, the kitchen closed between meals, not because anyone locked it, but because everyone knew the rule. You'll spoil your tea. Every child in Britain heard it. It meant the same
Spoil
thing
tea.
everywhere. Don't eat now, because dinner is at 5:30, and that's when we eat. Meals had their set times. Breakfast,
Yeah.
dinner, tea. Between them, you didn't eat. You didn't snack your way through the afternoon. You waited. And because you waited, you arrived at the table hungry, ate a proper meal,
That's
and
so
that was it
true.
until the next one. 3 fixed points in every day. What broke that rhythm happened gradually. Through the 80s and into the 90s, crisps and chocolate shifted from something you bought one bag at a time at the corner shop to something bought in bulk on the weekly supermarket run.
Yeah.
There was always a multi-pack in the cupboard, and if it's there, you eat it. Then the law changed. The Sunday Trading Act of 1994 meant large shops in England and Wales could open on Sundays for the first time. The Deregulation Act the same year removed the old weekday and Saturday closing hour restrictions.
Wow.
Food became available almost all of the time.
I didn't even know that was a thing, that some of these shops weren't even open on a Sunday and then they probably got closed early on a Saturday. Wow. That just goes to show you like just how much things are now have now became kind of way more commercialized and what has happened as a result. The consequence of that
Meant large shops in England and Wales could open on Sundays for the first time. The Deregulation Act the same year removed the old weekday and Saturday closing hour restrictions. Food became available almost all of the time, and when you can eat whenever you want, you'll spoil your tea stops meaning anything. The fourth thing wasn't about food at all. It was about movement and how Britain slowly...
And you know what, that's so crazy because it's so rare that you hear even nowadays that people say like they only eat food at a certain time. Like maybe people might still have a certain time to eat dinner and stuff like that, but outside of that, like lunch, tea, breakfast, all of that, everybody kind of just freestyles it nowadays. I mean, I only know one person where when I went to their house, they actually kept to like certain times for eating certain foods. But outside of that, yeah, it was pretty much whenever you felt hungry, you guys feeling like eating, yeah, okay, then you eat. Shocks me because I grew up in a world where that really wasn't a thing. Crazy to think about.
You'll spoil your tea stops meaning anything. The fourth thing wasn't about food at all. It was about movement and how Britain slowly stopped moving. In the 70s, nearly half of all households in Britain didn't own a car. By 2020, that figure had dropped to around 1 in 5. Households with 2 or more cars went from 8% in 1971 to 36% by 2020. The whole country got in the car and never got back out. At the same time, Britain's industrial base was disappearing. Between 1979 and 1983 alone, Britain lost around 1.5 million manufacturing jobs. Factories, steelworks, shipyards, mines. Men who had spent their days on their feet were now sitting behind desks or sitting at home. Physically demanding work, the kind that burns calories without anyone calling it exercise, was being stripped out of ordinary life. Children felt it too. In 1975, 74% of children aged 5 to 10 walked to school. By 2024, that had fallen to just over half, while car journeys to school nearly tripled. And then in 1989, the government published a white paper called Roads for Prosperity. It promised, in its own words, the biggest road building program since the Romans. More roads, more lanes, more car parks outside, more supermarkets, on more ring roads, around more towns.
More roundabouts.
The whole country was being reshaped around the car and around the idea that nobody needed to walk anywhere ever again. None of it happened because someone decided Britain should move less. Each change on its own was small. A car instead of a walk, a supermarket run instead of a trip down the road, but over 15 years they added up. And by the end of the 80s, the everyday movement that used to burn calories without anyone thinking about it had quietly disappeared. The fifth thing...
And that's something that, you know, when I did check out this, basically the same kind of topic, but with what was going on in the US, it's pretty much the same thing.
Calories without anyone thinking about it had quietly disappeared. The fifth thing is where the story gets darker. By this point, the food had changed and people were moving less than they used to. All that was left was the government's own advice on what to eat. And what happened to that advice before it ever reached to the public is something most people have never heard. In 1979, the government set up a committee with the initials NACNE, the National Advisory Committee on Nutrition Education, chaired by Professor Philip James. Its job was to review the British diet and report back. The report was ready by 1981. It said, clearly and in detail, that the typical British diet was a cause of obesity and serious disease. The food industry didn't like it, and the government didn't release it. For 2.5 years, the report sat locked away. It took a journalist, Geoffrey Cannon, to break the story on the front page of the Sunday Times in July 1983 under the headline, "Censored, a Diet for Life and Death." Only after the story broke in the press was the report finally published in October 1983. Think about that for a moment. For the entire early 80s, while school meals were being stripped back and ready meals were filling fridges, the government already had its own experts' findings about what was going wrong with the way Britain ate. It just chose not to tell anyone. The sixth thing...
Wild stuff, man. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't shock me that that kind of stuff would be hidden, and especially now when we're talking about food, like nutrition, like we need food to live. When you're hiding away information like that, that's how you know whoever's behind it is dark, because they truly don't care about the populace. Like, that is so egregious, and it's probably even worse today. I feel like this is definitely one of those topics that you can get really deep into, and it just gets even darker. Like, I feel like this video is probably only just scraping the surface as to kind of what is really going on with nutrition nowadays.
Fridges, the government already had its own experts' findings about what was going wrong with the way Britain ate. It just chose not to tell anyone. The sixth thing came the following year, when the government did finally give the public some advice. In 1984, a committee known as COMA, the Committee on Medical Aspects of Food Policy, published its report on diet and heart disease. The headline message was clear: cut saturated fat. It was based on the best science available at the time. Doctors believed it, the public believed it, and people did exactly what they were told. They switched to low-fat everything: skimmed milk, low-fat yogurt, reduced fat spread, diet this, light that. The supermarket shelves filled up almost overnight. But here's what nobody said out loud. When you take the fat out of food, it tastes of nothing, so manufacturers put something back in: sugar. A low-fat yogurt in the mid-80s could carry more sugar than a bar of chocolate. A reduced-fat biscuit might have fewer grams of fat on the label, but more total calories than the original because of the sugar that replaced it. Whole aisles were reorganized around the word light, but the food industry decided what following that advice would actually look like on the shelf. The label said healthy. The ingredients told a different story. The science around fat and sugar is still debated by researchers today, and none of this is as simple as one side being right and the other wrong.
Interesting.
But what nobody argues about is what the food industry did with it. They saw a gap in the market, filled it with products that said the right things on the front of the packet, and made a fortune, while people thought they were doing themselves good. The seventh.
That's the thing, because like when people hear reduced fat, like you're assuming it's going to be healthier for you. Like that's the impression it gives. Is because most people don't have time to be reading the back of it and just going through everything and trying to understand the ins and outs of it. Like that's the kind of thing you'd ideally expect to be made clear to you. And when you're using kind of misleading language like that, like, oh, it's less fat, but then there's just way more sugar in it. It's like, that is so manipulative. This is dark.
And made a fortune, while people thought they were doing themselves good. The seventh thing is different from the other six. It's the reason nobody managed to stop any of them in time. In 1972, a British professor of nutrition named John Yudkin published a book. Its title was Pure, White and Deadly. Yudkin was the founding professor of nutrition at Queen Elizabeth College, London. He was a serious, respected scientist who sat on the government's own advisory panel on food and health. His argument was simple. Sugar, not fat, was the real danger. He'd been saying it since the late 50s, building evidence, publishing research, warning anyone
Wow.
who would listen. The book laid it all out in plain language that anyone could follow. The sugar industry's response was not to prove him wrong. It was to destroy him. The World Sugar Research Organization called his book science fiction. The British Sugar Bureau dismissed his work as emotional assertions.
Come on.
He was dropped from international conferences. The British Nutrition Foundation, one of whose sponsors was Tate and Lyle, never invited anyone from Yudkin's department to sit on its committees. Even his own college broke a promise to let him use its research facilities after he retired. His career was taken apart piece by piece, not because anyone proved him wrong, but because the industry couldn't afford for him to be right.
Yikes.
By 1980, his reputation was in ruins. He spent his final years out of the spotlight, his work written off as an embarrassment by the very people who should have paid attention. He died in 1995, and the book went out of print. For years, second-hand copies were among the most sought-after out-of-print books in Britain. It wasn't taken seriously again until the late 2000s, when a new generation of scientists read his work and realized he'd been right about almost everything, decades before anyone else. The book was republished in 2012. By then, Yudkin had been dead for 17 years. Too late for him, but not too late for the rest of us to understand what happened and why. One man tried to tell Britain what was happening, and the people with the most to lose made sure nobody listened. That's why the other 6 went unchallenged. The one person who tried to warn the country had already been shut down. Those people on the high street in 1976 weren't doing anything special. They were just living before those 7 things changed the country around them. The Sunday roast, the walk to school, your mum telling you you'd spoil your tea, that was all real. And knowing what changed since then doesn't take any of it away. It just means it was never your fault. If any of that took you back, tell us in the comments. And if you know someone who remembers when things were different, send this to them.
What an insightful video, especially for myself. Majority of these I actually wasn't aware of being specific impact, especially that last one about that man who was basically taken out because of what he was saying, which ended up being true at the end. So yeah, stories like that don't surprise me in the least. And again, like, this whole topic of conversation just really starts to make you question and deep a lot of things. And you know, it's not even just with food, right? Like, I mean, if you really want to go down that rabbit hole, I'm sure you can go down that rabbit hole with everything, you know, and if you really want to go there. But yeah, I guess it's a matter of just navigating that for yourselves and trying to do what you can, because for the most part, like, a lot of this stuff is so deeply ingrained into society that it's very hard to avoid, unless you want to go to a remote island with just growing your own food and all that stuff. Like, you know, most people don't have the ability to just off route and go off grid like that. So yeah, you kind of just have to manage it to a degree, but I guess do what you can. It's like finding that balance and making those necessary small steps that create a big difference later down the line. At least, I don't know. What do I know? But I don't know. Listen, what do you guys think? I'd love to know what you guys have to say about this video in the comments below. How aware were you guys of a lot of the things that changed in the UK? Whether you were aware of a lot of these changes that occurred in 70s UK. But I also love to know, for those guys that aren't from the UK, whether you are surprised at what you saw or how similar or different it was in your own country. I'd love to know what you guys have to say about this from wherever you're watching. And yeah, definitely let me know how much you agree or disagree with what was being said. But of course, for those of you guys that did make it to this point in the video, shout out to you guys. Definitely let me know by commenting down a blue heart or hashtag flexer, so I know who my real ones are who made it this far. And of course, don't forget to smash the like button as well as hype this video, especially if you want to see me dive into more content like this. But it also does me a big favor in supporting the channel. So if you want to support me, that is a great way to do so. Of course, if you are new here, subscribe to the channel. Join me in the flexes on this road to 100k. As you can see in the top left hand side of the screen, we are growing fast. So jump on board so you can say you are part of this journey before we hit that 6-digit figure. And of course, if you guys do love how I dive even deeper into this world of the past and what changed, then I'm doing some bonus movie, sitcom and music reactions, some of which you guys are seeing on the screen, and plenty more where that came from. I'll definitely recommend it for those guys that are interested in that stuff, and you want to also get a fresh set of lenses on those classics I know you guys know and love, then consider joining me and the flexers in our after hours nostalgia club on the Patreon. The link to that will be in the description. But other than that, guys, if you do want to see me dive into some similarly related topics that I've already posted on the channel that I believe you guys will definitely enjoy, if you were interested in this one, then I've got some videos that pop up at the end of this that I believe you guys will enjoy. So I definitely hope to see you guys over there for those. But as always, guys, I've been your boy JayFlex, and I'll see you wonderful people in the next one. Peace.